Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. The day before my wedding, my fiancé suddenly announced that the ceremony was cancelled because he had just learned that Lily, the so-called fake Aries, who had been transferred back to the agricultural machinery factory in her hometown, had been assaulted by a group of thugs and gotten pregnant. She was too weak to undergo an abortion, and he said solemnly, "If I don't marry her, how will she survive?" In my previous life, I insisted on holding the wedding anyway. 3 days later, the news reached me. Lily, the fake Aries, had drowned herself in the river. Jason only said coldly that she had been too fragile. But after using my family's influence to climb his way up to become the factory director, he framed me, accusing me of leaking the factory's core technology to a foreign country. It was Jason's own hands that pushed me onto the stage of public denunciation. At that time, I was 7 months pregnant. I dragged him down with me, blood splattering everywhere. That lifetime ended in tragedy, and my family's name was forever disgraced. We carried that shame for the rest of our lives, never able to lift our heads again. When I opened my eyes once more, I had returned to the very day Jason said he wanted to call off the engagement. This time I would grant that couple their wish in the very beginning. "Emma, I can't marry you anymore," a cold voice said in front of me. Standing there was Jason Miller, the fiancé I had once loved so deeply that it carved scars into my soul. His work uniform, the neatly pressed shirt of a workshop team leader, was spotless. His brows were slightly furrowed, his face full of pretended pain and false sincerity. The face I had once adored to the point of heartbreak now only made me sick. 2 weeks ago, Jason said, Lily was assaulted by a few thugs at the agricultural machinery plant. The doctor said her body is too weak. If she terminates the pregnancy, it could cost her life. I have to marry her. His eyes were steady, as if he were making a noble sacrifice. There was even a hint of pride in his expression, the kind of pride a man wears when rescuing a damsel in distress. If I don't marry her, how could she go on living? Those words pierced through me like knives, one after another, cutting deep into my heart. In my past life, when I heard him say this, I cried until I couldn't breathe, clutching his sleeve, refusing to let go. In the end, the wedding still went on as planned. But 3 days later, the entire factory was shaken by the news. Lily had drowned herself in the river. At that time, Jason said calmly, "Emma, she was just too weak. Don't take it to heart." For 15 years after that, he played the role of a devoted husband, using my family's connections to climb one step after another until he became the factory's new director. And then it was Jason himself who led me, 7 months pregnant, onto the stage of accusation, charging me with leaking the factory's core technology to foreign companies. The verdict was death. I died humiliated and wronged. My hand moved unconsciously to my flat stomach, the place where once there had been a small life. Our child, 7 months old, a baby who had kicked gently inside me, a dream that never had the chance to be born. My child, the little one who gave me the will to live, never even got to see the world. I screamed at Jason, my voice breaking. "Even if you want me dead, couldn't you have waited until I gave birth? The baby is innocent. Why did it have to die with me?" He only looked at me coldly, his eyes as icy as winter frost. "This is fate," he said. "I don't need a child whose mother carries disgrace." "Emma, are you even listening to me?" Jason's voice pulled me back to the present. His tone had grown impatient, as if he thought he had already been too kind to me. "I know you're upset," he sighed softly, his voice full of fake tenderness, like an adult humoring a stubborn child. "But Lily ended up like this. Don't you think you share part of the responsibility?" I laughed, a hollow, trembling laugh, my chest tight with hatred so strong it made me shake. "Responsibility?" I repeated, my voice so cold it sounded like someone else's. "If it weren't for you." Suddenly, she returned from the countryside and exposed Lily's true identity. Why would she be so heartbroken that she made mistakes and was then transferred to the agricultural machinery workshop? If it hadn't been for you, wouldn't she have avoided all that? Jason's brow tightened and his tone grew stern. "Emma, don't be so selfish," he said. I stared straight at him, my eyes full of a murderous chill like a sharpened blade. If we're talking about selfishness, then Jason, who rode on my family's influence to climb the ladder, and who ultimately was the one who shoved me, 7 months pregnant with his child, onto that stage of accusation. He is the most selfish person alive. I am the legitimate daughter who, after 18 bitter years in the countryside, was dragged back only to be accused of ruining other people's happiness. Is that my fault? Must I pay for it? I smiled, a curl at the corner of my lips. My voice was light as the breeze but edged with thorns. So what are you saying, Jason? I'd really like to see how shameless you can be. I wanted to know how far he would go. Let's call off the engagement, he said casually, as if discussing trivial matters. Lily needs me now. He even had the nerve to continue with a righteous tone. Besides, you are still Director Nolan's legitimate daughter. You'll never starve, but she can't live without me. At that, his expression took on a patronizing air. Later, tell Director Nolan that you don't love me anymore and want to break the engagement. Consider it your way of atoning. Atoning, he said. In his eyes, I had to atone to Lily. In my last life, I stubbornly married him. Perhaps in his view, that was the greatest sin. So 15 years later, he coldly sentenced me, accusing me of crimes and declaring that this was fate. This life, however, I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't yield so easily, where fate would take those two who had been waiting. I smiled lightly, my voice as soft as wind skimming a lake. Fine, we'll call off the engagement. He froze, pupils constricting, shock flashing across his face. He clearly hadn't expected me to let go so decisively. Go ahead and marry Lily, I said, the words precise and unmistakable. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness. Surprise flickered across his face, then suspicion, and finally a smug, nauseating smile. I felt nothing but contempt. He really thought I was the same lovesick fool I'd once been, that I would suffer and make sacrifices for him. He was wrong. Soon enough, he would understand what I had granted him. Today was the road that would lead to his ruin. I tilted my head, keeping a smile on my lips. But there was one more thing. The smug look on his face hardened. In a little while, I'll tell my father that it was you, Jason Miller, who wanted to break the engagement, not me. Why should I cover for you? I said. The false tenderness drained from Jason's eyes. In its place rose an anger he could no longer disguise, like a dog whose tail has been stepped on, bristling and barking. Emma, I thought you'd finally be reasonable. Show some conscience. I never expected that selfish streak in you to be so deep. Now you plan to smear me in front of Director Nolan. He spat. I found him almost pitiably amusing. He still believed I was the naive girl from before, the lovesick fool who would break at the slightest shove. For half a beat, I let him keep that illusion. Tell me, Jason, I said calmly, a cool laugh like an autumn breeze slipping free. When you did those vile things, was that okay? But when I tell the truth, suddenly I'm the selfish one. Jason, your face is thick enough to weather a storm. He took a deep breath and forced himself to compose his features. His expression slowly returned to a practiced calm. He even wore that irritating smug smile. Say whatever you want, he said, leisurely straightening the collar of his work shirt. His posture calm and confident as if everything had already been choreographed. As for Director Nolan's reaction, let's just wait and see. With that, he turned and walked away. His back straight, arrogance written into every step as if he were heaven sent. No. My chest tightened suddenly, a cold shiver racing down my spine like ice water flowing upward. Jason had always been careful, reputation-minded, and painfully mindful of appearances. If he weren't, he couldn't have played the doting husband for 15 years, waiting until his power was secure, until he sat firmly in the director's seat before pushing me to my death. A man like him could never act so casually unless he had already prepared something in advance. I closed my hand until my nails bit into my palm. The sharp pain snapped me fully awake. I had to find my father. I had to tell him everything before Jason made his move. But I'd only taken a few steps when someone came running down the corridor, the factory office's information clerk, his face more serious than I'd ever seen. Comrade Nolan, he said in a low, hurried voice. The director has just received orders and must go to the capital for an emergency production meeting. He won't be back for 2 days. My whole body went rigid. It felt as if the blood had been drained from me. Coldness bit straight to my heart. In my last life, my father had refused every meeting and social event just so he could personally preside over my wedding. He said he wanted to see me married happily. But now he'd been suddenly called away for an urgent meeting. A bad premonition wormed through me. Could Jason already have interfered? No. That was madness, I told myself, shaking my head to banish the thought. I had lived with him for 15 years in my past life. Every frown, every breath, every false smile of his, I knew down to the marrow. As I walked, I kept thinking about the expression he'd shown earlier. His tone, his glance, even the tiny unconscious lift of an eyebrow. Everything was exactly the same as before. If he had been reborn like I was, he would not behave so bluntly. He would be more secretive, act kinder, perform better, never show a crack. A man like him, the more memories he had, the more dangerous he would become, not so careless. Lost in thought, I heard familiar footsteps at the far end of the hall. My brother appeared, wearing his white and blue doctor's coat, his brows drawn tight with worry. When our mother died after a difficult birth, Daniel joined medicine. He's the one in our family who has always loved me most. It's about Jason, he said quietly. Yesterday he filed a transfer request. He wants to move Lily Nolan from the agricultural workshop back to the main factory. This was different from before. Everything was already drifting away from the orbit of my previous life. I was going to tear up the request, he added under his breath, his voice almost a hiss between his teeth, anger compressed to the breaking point. Then he produced an official certificate from the local clinic saying Lily had suddenly fallen ill and needed to be transferred to the main factory hospital for immediate treatment. Falling ill? Why hadn't it happened earlier? Why not wait a few days? Why now? Right before Jason cancels the engagement and plays the hero rescuing the damsel. I stared at the paper in his hand, my fingers clenching so tight the edge crumpled. In my previous life I didn't know whether Lily was really sick, but I remembered clearly right up until the moment she died. She had always been alone in that cold, remote agricultural workshop. Jason had never once mentioned bringing her back. My voice trembled as I spoke to my brother, a wave of unease swelling in my chest. Something about this wasn't right. No, not just strange but deeply wrong. Daniel's tone hardened, his eyes sharp as blades. 2 months ago, he said, I already noticed something off about Jason Miller. I told you to think carefully about marrying him, but back then you... He stopped mid-sentence, unable to go on. He didn't need to. I already knew what came next. In my previous life, blinded by love, I must have brushed off all his warnings. I probably even argued with him for Jason's sake, hurting him so deeply that he finally gave up on trying to reason with me. I bit my lip hard. Every mistake from my past life, I would pay for them now, correcting each one with my own hands. Daniel took a deep breath, then pulled a folded document from his pocket. His long, slender fingers trembled as he held it out. I looked at the report and a dreadful premonition, sharp and cold as a blade, seemed to cut straight into my chest. This is the pregnancy test result from this morning, he said, his voice icy. Lily is 6 weeks pregnant. 6 weeks. My head snapped up, my heartbeat pounding violently in my chest. Just earlier Jason had said that 2 weeks ago, she was assaulted by a gang of thugs. Yet, the test in my brother's hand clearly showed a pregnancy 6 weeks along. A month and a half ago, that was exactly when Jason had claimed he was attending a 3-day training in another district. My fingers turned ice cold as I clutched the paper, trembling. So it had all been planned from the start. 2 years before I was brought back from the countryside to the Nolan family. There had never been any sign of an inappropriate relationship between Jason and Lily. They had grown up together in the workers' residential compound, close as siblings, so pure and harmless that even my father and brother completely trusted them. That was why when he started showing interest in me, everyone in the family approved. In their eyes he was a good man, a model young worker, honest and hardworking. But now this child, there was no doubt, 9 out of 10. It was Jason's. Daniel's voice was like a blade slicing through the last layer of illusion, his words cutting straight into my already shredded heart. I stood frozen, listening to him analyze each detail, every word making my chest tighten painfully. In my previous life I had long understood how special Lily was to him. She was the reason I'd fallen into ruin, the reason my name was dragged through the mud. But I hadn't realized that even back when I trusted him, loved him, and convinced myself he was faithful, he had already been entangled with her in that filthy, despicable affair. 2 years ago, just after I had been brought home from the countryside, Lily had drugged me, scheming to have me assaulted by thugs so that my reputation would be destroyed and I'd be forced into marriage with the man she'd chosen. That day, in the dim corner of the factory, the sound of Jason's leather shoes kicking over a metal barrel as he rushed in to save me had echoed in my mind for years. That sound had once been the only light in my soiled memory, the moment I thought someone had truly rescued me. Afterward, rumors spread throughout the entire factory. Jason treated Lily only as an innocent younger sister, while his love for me, Emma Nolan, was said to be deep as the sea. At that time I had just returned to the city. My technical skills were outdated, and I couldn't keep up with the production pace. Jason used to come 2 hours early every day, turning complex engineering drawings into simple cards so I could understand them more easily. Once, when I was assigned to an emergency night repair shift, he hurriedly shoved a few sheets of paper into my hand, still warm with the heat of his palm. I had believed with all my heart that he was the one sitting under the cold light of the lathe, staying up late to help me learn. He had once spent long nights sketching each line, every detail, all for me. That was why in my previous life, when he said he wanted to break off our engagement to marry Lily, I had been foolish enough to think he did it out of compassion because he couldn't bear to see his little sister suffer. But what was the truth? He had betrayed me long before that. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to swallow the wave of rage and nausea rising in my chest. When I opened them again, all that was left in me was an icy calm. Lily's pregnancy, 6 weeks. Jason's blatant lie that it happened just 2 weeks ago cut through their mask of morality like a razor. But before I could take any action, vicious rumors had already begun to spread through the workers' compound like flies buzzing over rot. Every word aimed at me. Did you hear? That's the director's real daughter, Emma Nolan. Heartless, that one. She's the reason poor Lily got sent down to the agricultural factory. And if that wasn't enough, now the girl ended up like this. I'm telling you, my cousin's a doctor. She saw it herself. Lily's body is covered in bruises. Poor thing. It's heartbreaking. Just because she suddenly got to be called Miss Nolan, she's forgotten she used to be just a country sparrow. Look at that attitude. And what about Jason Miller? What a decent man. Gave up his fiancée, the director's daughter, just to save another woman. That's what a real man looks like. The gossip grew legs and ran wild. Overnight, it had filled every corner of the compound. In the cafeteria, the kitchen lady who used to greet me with a warm smile turned her back with a cold snort, whispering something sharp to the person beside her. Her eyes were like poison needles stabbing into my back without ever needing a knife. My brother was so furious that during the next factory meeting, he slammed his hand on the table and stood up. You have no right to slander my sister. You know nothing about her character. But his righteous defense only fueled their whispers further. See that? Dr. Nolan's blinded by family loyalty. Can't even see the truth anymore. Lily is the one who's been wronged here. Everyone knows it. He's still young. Doesn't understand how the world works. But Director Nolan's different. He raised Lily for 18 years. There's real love there. You think he'll just throw that away? Wait until he comes back from the capital and finds out what his daughter's done. He'll be heartbroken for Lily. You'll see. Jason arrived at the Nolan estate, striding through the gates with Lily clinging weakly to his arm. The yard was packed. Wives, workers, even factory staff crowded around to watch the drama unfold. Lily's wrist was wrapped in a white bandage stained with blood, her face as pale as paper. She clutched Jason's arm tightly, eyes vacant, mumbling over and over like someone half-crazed. Blood everywhere. It was so scary. Jason straightened his back, his worker's uniform crisp, his face full of self-righteous resolve. Comrades, he announced solemnly. Last night, Lily tried to take her own life. The doctor said if she had been brought in 30 minutes later, she wouldn't have survived. I stood under the ver, my lips curling slightly into a cold, detached smile. Daniel came rushing from the factory hospital, still in his white coat, stained with blood that hadn't yet been washed away. His brows drew together tightly as he scanned Lily's bandaged wrist. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and grabbed it. The precision of his movement stunned everyone into silence. Lily screamed, thrashing like a frightened rabbit, but she couldn't break free from my brother's iron grip. His expression was grave, brows furrowed, his fingers pressing exactly along her pulse as if checking something with absolute certainty. Seeing this, Lily's eyes flickered sharply, and she quickly shifted tactics. With one sudden motion, she tore away the bandage wrapped around her wrist. The wound beneath the bandage was deep. Blood welled up immediately, dark and thick, spilling down her wrist in scarlet streams. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My pupils tightened sharply. For someone so frail she once complained about carrying a kettle of hot water. Lily had suddenly found the strength to cut herself so cruelly just to achieve her goal. Blood! There's so much blood! Someone shouted. Lily trembled, her body swaying weakly before collapsing into Jason's arms, delicate and fragile like a dying flower. Jason! She whimpered, her voice trembling. I dreamed about those men, the thugs. They were chasing me again. Her scream was so shrill it pierced the air, making several people cover their ears. A few of the workers' wives in the crowd, soft-hearted as ever, began to cry. Between sobs, they murmured accusations toward my family. Poor girl. Let her stay and rest. How could the Nolans be so heartless? Jason seized the moment. Straightening his back, he raised his voice with righteous indignation. The Nolan family raised Lily for 18 years. How could they turn their backs on their own daughter over something so small? Are you really willing to drive her to her death? His words were like a spark dropped into boiling oil. The crowd exploded. Voices rose everywhere, angry and chaotic. Let her stay. Let her stay, at least for now. The noise grew unbearable. That was when I finally spoke. My voice rang clear, cutting through the chaos. Daniel. He turned toward me, worry and confusion clouding his eyes. I could tell what he was thinking, that in everyone's eyes I was now the villain, the cruel imposter daughter, unworthy of even stepping into the Nolan house. I gave his hand a small reassuring squeeze, signaling him to trust me. I know what I'm doing. In my previous life, when I was falsely accused of being a spy who leaked factory technology abroad, the venomous words of the onlookers had burned themselves into my memory. A country girl will always be filthy, no matter how high she climbs. They raised Lily for 18 years, and the moment they got their real daughter back, trouble followed. Now the rumor spreading across the compound painted me as a heartless monster who had driven Lily to despair. If I refused to let her stay now, wouldn't that just be handing them more fuel to burn me alive in gossip? My gaze dropped to Lily's wrist, where the fresh wound oozed crimson, a perfect piece of evidence, false but effective, of her suffering. My expression hardened. You want to play the victim and twist right and wrong? Fine, let's see who plays it better. Only by keeping her in the Nolan house, right under the brightest light, would her filthiest tricks, hidden in the shadows, be forced into the open. Leaning closer to Daniel, I whispered, calm but firm, let her stay for 2 days. When father returns, everything will come to light. He met my eyes, cold understanding flickering in his, and gave a brief nod. In that same moment, I caught a fleeting glint of triumph flash through Lily's eyes, so quick it almost went unnoticed. But she hid it well. Curling up once more in Jason's arms, her demeanor fragile, pitiful, as though even a breeze might break her. I watched them quietly, the corner of my lips curving slightly, my gaze cool and mocking. Lily, I thought, your comfortable days are only just beginning. That night Jason came to see me. The faint sugary scent of Lily's body lotion still clung to him. The same sweet, nauseating fragrance that filled her room. It made me want to retch. Emma, he said hoarsely, his eyes red as if tormented by guilt. I haven't slept for 2 days. Every time I close my eyes I see your smile. I know I've lost the right to face you, but I can't live without you. I stepped back, avoiding his hand as he reached for me. My voice was cold as ice, laced with quiet ridicule. Mr. Miller, you should save those words for Lily. Maybe she'll be moved enough to shed a few crocodile tears for you. As for me, don't bother. I'd rather not dirty myself. His face froze for an instant, but he quickly recovered, putting on that same pitiful fake look I'd seen so many times before. But the baby in Lily's womb, he began, pausing just long enough to sound tormented, his voice low and heavy with faint guilt. Once she gives birth, I'll take her far away. We can still Before he could finish, I couldn't stand another second of it. All the humiliation, fury, and resentment of 2 lifetimes surged up inside me like fire bursting through my chest. My hand moved on instinct. Smack. The sound of the slap cracked through the air, sharp and ringing, echoing off the walls. Jason Miller. I spat, my voice shaking with rage. Do you even know what shame is anymore? How much lower can you possibly sink? I glared at him, my eyes burning, my entire body trembling. When I trusted you completely, you used me like a puppet, controlling and manipulating me however you pleased. And now that I've finally let go, you come crawling back, pretending to be miserable and heartbroken. You think I'll fall for it again. A bright red handprint bloomed across his cheek. His eyes widened in disbelief, as if the slap had torn away the last piece of his mask. There was shock there, and that pathetic, ridiculous imitation of heartbreak that almost made me laugh. I clenched my fists, every word I spoke slicing through the air like a blade. Even if you hadn't canceled the engagement yet, the fact that you've been tangled up in this filthy mess with Lily is enough for me to cut you off forever. You said you're marrying her to save her. Then tell me there are plenty of women in this world suffering far worse than she is. Why don't you marry them all and save everyone while you're at it? The words had barely left my lips when a sharp crash split the air. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room and cold water splashed across the tiled floor. I turned sharply in the pale moonlight filtering through the window. Lily stood frozen in place. Shards of glass glittered at her feet, her face deathly pale. Her lips trembled, unable to form a sound, and her eyes, wide and vacant, were locked on Jason. Under that thin veil of moonlight, her face twisted, distorted, as though some demon from hell had climbed into her skin. Finally, she understood. The marriage she had schemed and fought so viciously for was nothing but a pitiful farce. Jason's entanglement with her had never been love. It was greed. Greed for the warmth she threw at him so desperately, and the convenience of the child she carried, an heir, a continuation of his bloodline. But the moment he realized that I had truly let him go, he panicked. He turned back, begging for my forgiveness, even slapping himself in desperation. She had wagered everything, her pride, her body, her faith, for a man who, in the end, was nothing but a cowardly, shameless hypocrite. A cold, mirthless laugh escaped me as I turned away, leaving behind those 2 pitiful creatures tangled in the mess they'd made for themselves. I didn't go far. I stopped at the end of the hallway, leaning quietly against the wall. Behind me came Lily's voice, sharp and broken with fury and jealousy, cutting through the air like shattered glass. What does she have that I don't? She screamed. She's just some country girl they took in and called a daughter. I've been with you for 18 years, Jason. 18 years. And the moment she showed up, you tossed me aside like I was nothing. You're using my baby to get ahead. And then what? You'll crawl back to her once it's done. Jason said nothing. He stood there like a statue, neither denying nor defending himself, letting her spiral deeper into hysteria. Half a year ago, she shouted, if it weren't for me reminding you that day, you would have left your classified project plan in the conference room. You could have been disciplined. Your whole career ruined. I saved you, Jason. You owe me. The moment those words hit my ears, my blood turned to ice. Because in my previous life, that incident had been handled by me. Back then, Jason had forgotten those confidential documents in the meeting room. He had panicked, terrified, completely losing his composure. It was me who had run around all night, begging one of my father's old subordinates for help, quietly retrieving that classified document before anyone noticed. I had saved Jason from disciplinary action and preserved his spotless reputation. But this time, because of Lily's little slip of the tongue, that incident had never even happened. In that instant, everything clicked into place. No wonder my father had been suddenly called away to the capital. No wonder Jason had dared to bring her back from the factory so early. So that was it. Lily was reborn too. She had returned earlier than me, taking her moves in advance, rewriting the story of my life piece by piece. She wanted to replace me to live the life that was supposed to be mine. How ironic. In our last life she had died too soon. So the only memories she brought back were fragments, shallow and incomplete. Even with a second chance, she was still the same petty fool with short sight and low cunning. The argument inside the room eventually quieted. I let out a cold mocking laugh and turned away, heading back to my bedroom. The next morning, as soon as I opened my door, I heard the grating sound of soft sobbing, like the buzz of a mosquito, coming from Lily's room. By evening, she was at it again, staging another act. She accidentally spilled a basin of water in the hallway, soaking her nightdress, and then appeared at my doorway, trembling and pitiful. "Emma, my nightgown's all wet. Could I borrow one of yours to change into?" Without a word, I reached into my closet, pulled out a simple dress, and tossed it to her. As she caught it, she swayed a little, pretending to lose balance, but her gaze didn't leave the hot water kettle sitting on my table. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "At it again, huh?" Before she could speak, I deliberately picked up my enamel mug and held it out to her. "You look shaken. Have some hot water. It'll calm you down." Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup. The tip of her pinky brushed the surface of the water ever so slightly, a barely noticeable motion, but I caught it. Ha! Still the same filthy little trick. 2 years ago she drugged me to ruin me. Now, to frame me again, she was willing to drug herself. Impressive, I thought coldly. You've made progress, Lily. The instant she lifted the cup, I saw it. The fleeting flash of smug satisfaction in her eyes, a flicker of triumph that she thought was invisible. She really believed she'd succeeded. Pathetic. She thought she was playing some masterful game of manipulation, never realizing she was the one dancing like a fool in the palm of my hand, a pitiful puppet in her own farce. I had already confirmed with Daniel that she was truly pregnant, which meant that if she wanted to stage a miscarriage to frame me, there was no need to stop her. Because that child in her womb carried Jason's blood. In my previous life, when Jason drove me to the edge and we both died together in that sea of fire, I too had been pregnant with a child who never saw the light of day. An innocent life gone before its first breath. A man like Jason Miller, a man capable of destroying his own blood, had no right to call himself a father. I could almost hear my heart screaming in my chest. And yes, I truly wanted to see the look on his face when he discovered that the woman he claimed to love so deeply, the one who used their unborn child to chain him into marriage, had killed that very child herself just to harm me. I wanted to see it. The moment that mask of righteousness shattered into horror, a sharp, piercing scream tore through the night. Lily collapsed, clutching her stomach, crimson blood spreading quickly, soaking through her nightgown and pooling between her legs like a dark stream. At that exact moment, a familiar voice echoed through the house, deep, warm, full of both joy and urgency. "Emma, Emma, I'm back. I couldn't miss my daughter's wedding. Not for the world. My precious girl." My father's voice. My father had returned. Lily trembled violently, her blood-smeared hand clutching desperately at the hem of my pants. "Sister, do you hate me that much?" she sobbed. Before I could say a word, my father hurried up the stairs, his face pale and tense. Jason was right behind him. And the moment his gaze fell upon the dark pool of blood spreading across the floor, his face went completely white. He froze, taking half a step back, eyes wide with shock and fear. His throat bobbed as he tried to speak, but no words came out. It was clear he hadn't known about this little miscarriage performance. A bloody farce directed entirely by its leading lady. Even now, Lily continued her act, her face streaked with tears and snot, clinging to the last thread of hope. She stumbled toward my father, who had just reached the top of the stairs, and threw herself at his feet, crying brokenly. "Dad, I just wanted to apologize to my sister, to beg her not to hate me anymore." Her words dissolved into sobs, her trembling hand lifting the enamel cup I had given her earlier that evening. She put something in my drink," Lily cried, her voice quivering and full of pitiful regret. "Just like 2 years ago when I made that mistake with her." The accusation fell from her lips slowly, each word dripping with false remorse and poisonous implication. Jason immediately lunged forward, kneeling beside her and carefully gathering her into his arms. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, burning with fury and grief. "Emma Nolan, you knew Lily was weak, yet you still hurt her. You caused her miscarriage." Lily lay trembling in his embrace, her voice soft and fragile like a dying breeze. "Don't blame her. It's my fault. I deserve this. 2 years ago, I was foolish and let someone manipulate me. I gave her something I shouldn't have. I almost caused disaster. Now she's just giving me what I deserve. Where even now?" Then, with visible effort, She pushed herself out of Jason's arms and fell to her knees before my father. Her forehead hit the floor with a loud, sharp thud. "Dad," she sobbed. "I know I'm not your real daughter. I never expected you to love me as much as her. I only ask that you forgive my past mistakes. Please forgive me." My father stood in silence. His gaze first swept over the blood-soaked floor, his brows furrowing tightly. Then his sharp eyes moved from Lily's pale, trembling face to Jason's guilty expression before finally landing on me. In his eyes, I caught the flicker of doubt and a faint, almost imperceptible worry. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm, every word landing heavy in the air. "You've been living in the agricultural machinery factory this whole time and were never married. So where did this child come from? And as for Emma, what reason would she have to harm the baby you claim to carry?" Lily went completely still. The question sliced through her carefully crafted facade like a blade, shredding her mask of fragile innocence. She trembled, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe that the man she'd always called Dad was now doubting her. Jason tightened his grip on her shoulders, straightening his back, his voice loud and righteous. "Director Nolan," he declared. While Lily was working at the agricultural machinery factory, she was attacked by some local thugs. She lived in poverty for 2 years. Her health was already poor. The miscarriage tonight, the doctor said it could endanger her life. I was worried for her safety, so I brought her home without permission. I think Emma may have misunderstood the situation. I stared at their hands still clasped together, and a cold smile curved my lips. A perfect pair indeed. One used the life in her womb as a bargaining chip, bleeding and sobbing her way through the performance. One of them hid behind the excuse of duty and moral obligation, painting himself as a man reluctantly sacrificing for the greater good. The other played her part perfectly. Together they were a flawless duet, each line and tear carefully orchestrated. Their performance turned me into the wicked jealous woman, while wrapping Jason Miller in a shining cloak of righteousness and virtue. A noble man of compassion, loyalty, and responsibility. It was brilliant, really. Beneath the glittering disguise of morality and decency, they were nothing but liars cloaked in hypocrisy. And their goal wasn't just to redeem Jason's image. No, they wanted to use Lily's sob story, her being sent to the rural factory, her poor background, her miserable life to squeeze pity and guilt out of my father. A calculated move, shrewd and manipulative. Sure enough, my father's expression shifted slightly as he listened to their tragic, sentimental act. Lily noticed it immediately. Her eyes gleamed and tears began to fall faster. Each drop timed perfectly as though meant to pierce my father's heart and soften his resolve. "Dad," she choked out between sobs, her voice thick with practiced sorrow and yearning. "Do you remember when I was 10 and I nearly died from a high fever? You stayed up for 3 days and nights to watch over me. You said, even if you had to bring in every doctor in the province, you would save me no matter what." Her tone carried the weight of both grief and desperate longing for affection. Jason's eyes gleamed, his voice low and trembling as he added, "Director Nolan, Lily has always said, you're the closest family she's ever had, the most important person in her life." Every word they spoke was a gamble, a bet on my father's kindness and his deep sense of duty. They were betting that 18 years of raising Lily, blood relation or not, would be enough to break his judgment and make him forgive her. But unfortunately for them, they bet wrong. I stood silently beside him, the corner of my lips curling into a cold, quiet smile, because I knew this man better than anyone. Not just because in my previous life he had risked everything to clear my name when I was framed for leaking factory secrets, but because he carried within him a secret so enormous that Lily herself still had no idea. A secret about her true identity. Enough. My father's roar cracked through the air like thunder, silencing the entire room. He stepped forward, pulling me behind him with one arm shielding me. His coat was neatly buttoned, but the vein in his neck pulsed with restrained fury. His eyes locked on Lily razor-sharp, filled with disgust and contempt. "My daughter Emma Nolan," he said, voice cold and powerful, "would never do something so vile. She is the flesh and blood of the Nolan family. My daughter, but you a shameless impostor. You're the one who resorts to such filthy tricks and still dare to frame her. You disgust me." Our eyes met for a brief moment. No words were needed. In that instant I knew he trusted me completely. Lily's face drained of color. She must have realized that her plan to drag me down with her had failed. Yet even then she refused to give up. She still held on to that delusional hope that even if she couldn't destroy me, she might still win my father's forgiveness. She crawled toward him trembling, her tears falling in messy streaks. "Dad, when you brought me home, I was just a baby wrapped in a blanket. I didn't know anything. I was innocent. Please, Dad, please believe me." Then she turned to me, sobbing harder, her voice breaking apart as though her heart were being ripped from her chest. "Sister, I never meant to hurt you. It wasn't my fault you were lost all those years. I swear this life, the next, I'll do anything to make it up to you. I'll work. I'll serve you. I'll pay for everything I did. Please forgive me. I'm begging you." At that moment Daniel entered. He was carrying a heavy first aid kit, his face calm, his expression utterly emotionless. He didn't even spare the two people kneeling on the floor a glance as he walked straight up to my father. "Dad," he said in a low, steady voice that carried like a strike of thunder. "I've checked Lily's pulse. She's about 6 weeks pregnant. Is it Jason Miller's child?" Lily's blood-streaked hand was still clutching the cuff of my father's trousers. The instant the words left Daniel's mouth, my father jerked his leg free, flinging her hand off as if it burned him. She collapsed to the floor, limp and trembling. My father's fists clenched so tightly that the veins on his forehead stood out like cords. Suddenly, with a furious kick, he sent the nearby tea table crashing over. "Excellent," he roared, his voice filled with rage. "First, you stole my daughter's place in this family when she didn't even know who she was. And now you want to steal her man too." He pointed straight at Lily, each word ground out between his teeth. 25 years ago, when your mother switched the babies while my wife was dying in childbirth, she should have known this day would come." Lily froze in shock as though struck by lightning. Her voice quivered. "What are you talking about? Switch babies? Wasn't it just a mistake?" My father let out a bitter laugh, his eyes dark and cold. "A mistake? No, it was deliberate. I let your mother help care for my wife during labor. I trusted her. I trusted her with the life of the woman I loved most in this world. And while my wife was fighting for her life, that vile woman switched my newborn daughter, put you, the blood of a traitor, into my house." Lily's face drained of all color, her lips trembling violently. My father stared at her, his voice like a blade slicing through the air. "You remember when you were 5 and nearly died of a fever? Do you remember what I told you then?" I said. "I've already lost your mother. I can't lose you two. I thought you were my daughter. I thought you were the child my wife had brought into this world." Jason looked from me to Lily, his eyes flickering wildly, his arms tightening around her as if to anchor himself. Daniel let out a sharp, bitter laugh, his tone like cold steel. "And just to make things perfectly clear, your real father's last name is also Nolan. That's why you carry the same name as us. Not because we lied to you, but because you were never meant to belong here in the first place." Lily's whole body shook uncontrollably. "No, no, that's not true," she screamed, her voice shrill and frantic. "You're lying to me. Mom said, Mom said." My father cut her off coldly. "Your mother went to her grave refusing to tell you the truth. Out of respect for those 18 years I raised you, I kept silent, but I never thought the child I took in would grow into a snake wearing human skin." His eyes burned with fury. "A dragon gives birth to a dragon, a phoenix to a phoenix, but a rat will only ever know how to dig in the dirt. Your mother dared to switch my child, and you dared to drug and frame her. 2 years of re-education in that rural factory taught you nothing except how to seduce other women's men and play the victim." He stepped closer, his voice thundering. "The Nolans raised you for 18 years, but not even that could wash the filth from your blood." Jason stood beside her, ashen-faced. His jaw trembled, but he forced himself to speak, clinging to whatever dignity he had left. "Director Nolan, sir, this must be a misunderstanding." My father's eyes snapped to him, filled with disgust and disappointment so deep it seemed to hollow the air. "Jason Miller," he said slowly, each word sharp as ice. "I misjudged you. I thought you were a promising young man, a bright talent with a future. You improved production efficiency, exceeded quotas month after month. I believed in you, but look at you now. Throwing away everything for trash like this. You've lost not just your judgment, but your integrity." A man who can't even control himself. What right does he have to represent this factory? Jason's face turned ghostly pale, his knees buckled, and he dropped to the floor with a thud, bowing his head again and again. Director, please. I was drugged that night. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't mean for her to get pregnant. Please, you have to believe me. I stared down at him in silence, my expression frozen, my eyes cold as winter glass. Daniel lifted his chin slightly, gesturing toward the two people groveling on the floor. Their mess has nothing to do with us, he said evenly. If she needs medical care, send her to the factory infirmary. Otherwise, get them both out of my sister's sight. The harsh fluorescent lights of the factory's main hall glared so brightly they almost stung the eyes. I stood near the front platform, gazing out at the packed sea of workers below. Every employee was present. Supervisors, engineers, foremen, all staring toward the stage. Jason sat in the third row right in the middle where everyone could see him. His uniform was crisply pressed, the creases sharp and perfect. But no amount of tidiness could conceal the despair in his eyes, and beside him sat Lily, the woman he had once called fragile, the one he swore would die if she ever lost their child. Now she sat there still breathing, curled up in a dark corner, neither dead nor destroyed, just pitifully clinging to existence. Comrades! My father's deep commanding voice echoed across the factory's main hall, silencing the murmurs that had been spreading like wildfire. Today, we are holding this all-staff meeting to clarify certain false rumors that have been circulating within our factory. The hall fell silent at once, so still that a pin dropping would have sounded like thunder. I took a steady breath, opened my briefcase and pulled out the folder I had prepared in advance. This, I said, holding it high for everyone to see, is the prenatal examination record of Comrade Lily Nolan from the Agricultural Machinery Branch Clinic. A red seal stamped the page clearly. According to this, I continued, the fetus was already 6 weeks old at the time of the examination. An examination conducted 2 weeks ago. A wave of gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. However, I said, pausing deliberately as I turned toward Jason. According to Comrade Jason Miller, Lily was assaulted by local thugs a month ago. I let my words hang in the air, calm but razor sharp. The timeline doesn't quite match, does it? Jason shot to his feet, face burning with anger and panic. Emma Nolan, you're violating her privacy. Comrade Miller, my father's cold voice cut in, steady as a blade. Sit down and mind your words. Jason's expression drained of color. After a long moment of humiliation, he lowered himself back into his seat, fists clenched tight. I continued, my tone even but unyielding. Coincidentally, I said, pulling out another folder 1.5 months ago, Comrade Jason Miller went on a 3-day business training trip. This is the official travel authorization and the train ticket, both verified. His destination: the same county where the Agricultural Machinery Branch Factory is located. The room erupted like an explosion. Gasps, exclamations, and furious murmurs filled the air as the truth slammed into every corner of the hall. From where I stood, I could see the disgusted looks exchanged among the female workers in the front row. The union representatives, women who'd once respected Jason, whispered to each other, shaking their heads, eyes filled with open contempt for both him and Lily. I straightened my back and let my voice ring out clear and strong. In summary, the child in Comrade Lily Nolan's womb belongs to Comrade Jason Miller. The two fabricated a story about her being assaulted to exploit everyone's sympathy and secure her return to the main factory. Their relationship has existed for quite some time, possibly even during my engagement to Comrade Miller, if not earlier. I let that sink in before finishing, my words sharp as glass. This is a serious violation of both workplace ethics and personal integrity. The hall fell silent again. A heavy, suffocating silence filled with judgment. Lily suddenly screamed, her voice shrill with desperation. That's a lie. I was attacked. It was those thugs. Enough. My father's thunderous voice cut her off like a whip. The district police and local authorities have already investigated the matter thoroughly. During the period in question, there were no reports of any assaults or violent incidents. This deceitful parade ends here. Lily froze mid-scream. Her body stiffened, her breath hitched, and the sound died in her throat like a strangled cry. My father held up a folder stamped with an official red seal. His voice was cold and final. I now announce the disciplinary decision concerning Comrade Jason Miller. After review and approval by the higher authorities, he is hereby stripped of his title as Section Chief and revoked of his outstanding worker commendation. Effective immediately, he will be reassigned as a regular laborer to the new factory branch in the Northwest Desert for continued supervision. Jason's face turned the color of ashes. His once pristine uniform couldn't hide the trembling of his shoulders. He squeezed his eyes shut as if the darkness could spare him from the sound of his own downfall. As for Lily, she slumped down like a broken doll, her body sliding toward the corner of the wall. Her gaze went glassy, her lips moving soundlessly. Then all at once she lifted her head and turned toward Jason, her eyes wild and desperate, clinging to him like a drowning woman grasping for air. "You said it yourself, didn't you?" Lily's voice cracked through the silence, desperate, trembling. "We can still make this work, right?" But Jason instantly turned away from her, as if avoiding a contagious disease. Unable to even look at her, I stepped down slowly from the stage, the echo of my heels cutting through the heavy air. Every eye in the auditorium followed me as I approached him. I stopped right in front of Jason Miller, leaned forward slightly and spoke softly, just loud enough for him alone to hear. "For someone like her, you betrayed me. You betrayed the Nolan family. You destroyed your own future with your own hands. Tell me, Jason, was it worth it?" His lips trembled but no sound came out. Then I turned to Lily. Her eyes, red and wild, burned with hatred so fierce it could have cut flesh. "Are you satisfied now, Emma?" she hissed through clenched teeth. I smiled faintly and shook my head. "Not yet," I said quietly, my voice calm but cold. "The show's only just begun. Your grand performance, Lily, still has a second act waiting." After the meeting ended, I waited deliberately in the corridor, timing my steps so I accidentally ran into Jason as he was leaving the factory clinic. His face was gone, hollowed out like a man already half dead. Faking polite concern, I smiled sweetly. "Comrade Miller, here for a follow-up checkup?" He stiffened immediately, his voice like ice. "Emma Nolan, what are you scheming this time?" I didn't answer. I simply pulled a folded document from my file and handed it to him. "Relax," I said evenly. "I just thought you should see this." He took it reluctantly, his eyes scanning the page. Printed clearly at the top were the words, "Toxic substance detected. Aconitine." "Aconitine?" I explained softly, watching the color drain from his face. "A highly poisonous compound found in monkshood. An herb that only grows in the mountains near the agricultural plant. You tell me, Jason, who would have easier access to it, her or me?" His throat worked as he forced out a hoarse whisper. No, that's impossible. She could never be that cruel." I studied him quietly, the way his world crumbled in front of me, and then took out another report. "Last week," I said, "my father sent investigators to that very same area, to the rural camp where she was once stationed." I unfolded the document slowly. "Here's what they found. At least 7 local men admitted that 2 days after you left that region, they'd each spent the night with her." I looked straight into his eyes, my tone flat and almost amused. "Quite the coincidence, don't you think? She slept with half the village. Yet somehow that one time resulted in a pregnancy conveniently with you. Quite the effort she put in just to crawl her way back to the main factory and to you." Leaning closer, I whispered near his ear, my voice a quiet blade. "Now tell me, Jason, why do you think she was able to harm her own child without even blinking?" He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his grip iron tight, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to hurt. "You're lying," he hissed. "You're making all this up." The light in his eyes, the arrogance, the self-assurance had shattered. All that remained was panic, despair, and a deep gut-wrenching hatred for the woman who had played him like a fool. I didn't flinch. Inside, I only thought coldly. From this moment on, Lily Nolan's life will never know peace. What an ironic ending. Jason Miller, the man who once fancied himself clever and calculating, was tricked by the same woman twice in 2 lifetimes, and both times he fell in exactly the same way. In my previous life, because of that woman's bastard child, he'd sent me to my death. In this one, he destroyed his own life with his own hands. The Nolan family had never needed to dirty ours. We let the guilty bury themselves. Jason's scandal spread quickly through the entire factory system. By the time he arrived at the desolate construction site in the windswept Northwest, He'd been assigned to the foundation digging crew, spending his days drenched in sweat and caked in dirt. The once outstanding worker of the factory was now less than a common laborer. Rumor had it he was often punished unfairly by his supervisor, docked pay for no reason, his rank demoted again and again. Within 6 months, he'd fallen from a key technician to a camp cook, the man who boiled water and served food for the other workers. Another half-year passed. One morning, Daniel tossed a folded labor newspaper onto the kitchen table. The corner of the paper, barely the size of a cigarette box, held a small social news headline. The headline was chillingly brief. Gruesome murder at Northwest construction site. Daniel set the paper down with a quiet sigh. Jason Miller wanted to divorce Lily Nolan, he said simply, handing me an apple he'd just rinsed. His voice was calm, almost detached. But Lily had proof of his abuse. She threatened to expose everything if he left, so he stayed. The two of them spent a year tearing each other apart out there in the Gobi winds, slowly driving each other insane. He paused, eyes darkening. In the end, Jason snapped. He beat her to death with a shovel. My hand still halfway to my mouth, Daniel continued evenly, and after that, he buried her body under a pile of sand at the construction site. Thought he could hide it for good. I bit into the apple. The sweetness spread across my tongue, strangely sharp. And then I asked softly, "He was arrested soon after?" Daniel said, exhaling. "Confessed everything the moment they caught him. Said he'd rather be executed than ever see her face again. Said he didn't want to live another day in that godforsaken place." Sunlight streamed through the window, glinting across the newspaper. The small article in the corner, barely a few lines, blurred beneath the light. The words about the murder, about that barren desert, shimmered and dissolved into nothing. I smiled faintly, my tone light and almost indifferent. What a pity. I didn't get to see it happen with my own eyes. Daniel reached out and ruffled my hair gently. His voice was low and steady, carrying the warmth only an older brother could give. "There's nothing to pity, Emma. Filth like that, seeing more of it would only stain your eyes." The sunlight spilled across the floor, climbing up the strands of my hair, wrapping me in quiet warmth. And in that golden light, every shadow that had once weighed down my heart finally began to fade away. My life, my real life, was only just beginning.